things that make you go, like timing that is just a little too good to be a coincidence. Things like that happen every day, and Pete and I talk about them. Today we've got another, Fusion Pharmaceutical. But let's get started with the Rebel's Edge. Bang! He is Pete Najarian. I'm Jon Najarian, and neither of us think that there's coincidence when somebody buys an awful lot of calls just before a takeover. I'd say that's more than coincidental, but we'll see. We'll see. People always do look into these things, or at least that's what they're supposed to do. Anyway, folks, it is March 19th. This is the Rebel's Edge, and Pete and I break down macro minute, as well as fantastic futures, stocks, and a look at one of the most exciting players in the NBA coming up. So let's dive right in, Pete, with the macro minute. And I'm going to say today, because it's a 2-day Fed meeting, so I'm not going to focus on that as much. Instead, I'm going to say housing starts and building permits bounced back more than expected. So that's yet one more thing, Pete, that might keep the Fed in that 99.99% do nothing.
And the likelihood of that, John, I think is pretty clear. I think the CME Fed tool is giving us a pretty good signal of what's going to happen here. I think the interesting thing is, going back to Powell for just 1 second, John, he talked about a couple of weeks ago, he was talking about cuts, and he said it may not be that far off. Well, the problem is he also mentioned inflation signals need to cooperate. Well, let me ask you if they've cooperated, because in January, the price of gas at the pump on average was $3. You know what it is now? $3.40. So I would have to say, I think there's a little bit of inflation going on in different parts of the market, across many different parts of the market. So there is just no way they could justify doing anything other than, at least right now, from everything they've told us, than to pause, which is what they're going to do. Now, what does he say afterwards? That's where, John, we hope he puts nails in his shoes so that he doesn't put his foot in his mouth. That's what we're hoping for.
Nails in the shoe. I like that. Yeah. Or through the shoe. All right. Well, now let's hit fantastic futures, Pete.
Fantastic futures.
That's fantastic futures, man, flying across the screen there. Pete, I'm going to say there's a lot of questions right now. Is Bitcoin taking a breather, or is this the long-awaited correction after just a furious run? Now, we know we've got the halving, which, long story short, folks, the halving is the miners that get paid to basically prove out these long, complicated math problems to prove that a particular Bitcoin has exactly what people think it is. Well, that's been going on for a while, and the amount that they get goes down every 4 years. And this is that 4th year right now, Pete, that the amount of Bitcoins they're going to get gets cut in half. So less supply with increased demand usually means prices higher, but not today.
I'm going to hit it one more time, because we have to point out the obvious at times. And the obvious right now, John, is we talk about inflation. Is it sticky? Well, I already gave you the gas prices, but how about this? We finally got up above 80. We've gotten sticky above 80. And now here we are at 83. And if you look at the XLE, and yesterday we were also talking about some of the specific areas within energy, names out there that are in the refining space that are at all-time highs, not 52-week highs, all-time highs. There's a lot going on right now. So 83.50 we hit today, or just underneath 83.50. I would say it's feeling like it's going to be a little bit stickier, John, all the time.
Yeah, and Pete, the administration has less and less they can do about it, because as many of us know, and you and I have talked about, they have drained the strategic petroleum reserve by 50%. So now you got to keep a fair amount in there, because what if there is a war? What if there is something that cuts off production from the Middle East to come this way and so forth? That's going to be a big problem, and you don't have as much room to fight it as you did before.
Yeah.
All right, let's dive into stocks, Pete, starting with we've got a lot of emails and a lot of Twitter questions about shorting. And in a nutshell, folks, people buy stocks, stocks go higher, they sell the stock, or they just hold on to it. Shorting is where somebody sells, my hands are out like this, somebody sells a stock in hopes of buying it back cheaper. So you sell something at $10, hoping to buy it back at $8 or cheaper. And if you do that, you make a profit. Well, they have to borrow those shares, Pete. And the NASDAQ and a number of other places track how much the short interest has increased or decreased. And today, you have for us, Pete, 2 stocks in the S&P 500 that have pretty darn large short interests. So I thought we should address it.
And these aren't just some throwaway type names, John, that nobody's ever heard of before. Obviously, they're in the S&P 500, but you look at Paramount, it's like 13, 14% of the float or the outstanding, the double digits. We're talking about some very, very big names that you can see what this percentage of this looks like. And it is amazing because I'd never looked at these specific names, John, in terms of, well, could there be a squeeze here until the time comes? And Whirlpool is the other one. And as a matter of fact, in the last year, if you take a look at Paramount, the stock was $24 in April. Now it's 11. And that was April of last year, obviously. July, Whirlpool was 160. Now it's 105. It sure does look like these shorts have been on the right side of these 2 big names. And you and I hit this all the time. There's a lot of different names out there that we talk about each and every day that we actually always want to make sure you're aware of, because there are ways that you can kind of shift around, and we've all talked about that many, many times. But to see the size of the shorts in some specific names, it certainly can be a trigger, and it can give you a little bit of an insight into what direction. Is there a possibility of a squeeze or not? Do they need to start covering? You and I were talking about that with the stock yesterday. It was just getting cratered to the downside. When do they start to cover? Will they start to cover? Will that be the bump that gives them a lift? You just don't know. But knowing that there is that amount of shorts in there is certainly, I think, an advantageous thing.
Yep, it sure is. And so that's a real quick tutorial, folks, on shorting, how they make money, and some of the biggest stocks, not biggest stocks, but the biggest short interests within the S&P 500. All right, Pete, super microcomputer. This is one that when NVIDIA announced that they were going to have this AI days, where they basically have a big conference, have a lot of the folks that are involved with this, that'd be everybody from Micron on the memory side to super microcomputer. Super micro was getting cracked today because they announced, and I don't think this is dumb, Pete, but they announced they're going to sell 2 million more shares. So that obviously increases the cash that they have, because they'll collect money for selling those shares. They're not getting $2 million. They're getting a heck of a lot more than that. When your stock goes up as much as super micro has gone up, you can find great uses for that cash. And I think that's why they're smart to be doing it right now, Pete, even if in the very, very short term, it causes the stock to do what it's doing today, and that is move to the downside.
I think it's great timing. I agree with you totally, John. When you're talking about 2 million shares, you're talking about $1,000 stock. We're talking $2 billion. Not so bad. Not so bad. Seems like a pretty good idea, especially given where was the stock at the start of the year? Where is it right now? The move has been absolutely incredible. It makes a lot of sense that they might want to do something like this. And there is that little kicker with Goldman Sachs, John, for another 300,000 shares as well. So there's a lot going on. AI server, obviously anybody who's involved, and this is a deep part of AI. It's not just NVIDIA and some of these names. You've got a name like this specific one where it certainly is a big part of it. They talk about the racks and everything they're doing, the enhanced performance. I think for all those reasons, even though they're issuing the 2 million more shares, it could be a very, very interesting move that moves to the downside, but it might not last all that long, because I think people really have the appetite right now, John, and that might continue in AI. They're taking a breather is the way it looks like to me, at least right now.
Yeah, I'm in that camp, Pete. And like I say, no better time to raise cash than when your stock is up. Stock is up, you sell more shares, you take that cash and you plow it right back into the business one way or another. That's building the business in my mind. All right, let's talk about Fusion Pharmaceutical, Pete. So this is pretty interesting because they have this treatment for cancer, and one of, prostate cancer and others. They produce something that is an alpha particle, Pete. And these alpha particles go after cells, but they only move apparently just a few cells, like 3 cells at a time. So you might kill a couple of healthy cells, but you're mainly just hitting that cancer and killing it, and then maybe a couple other cells, not a big blast like is presently used in prostate cancer treatments. AstraZeneca, they say, I want it. I'm buying this company. It's going to be worth multiple billions to us in revenue over the next couple decades. And guess what? Just before this deal was announced, Pete, things that make you go, somebody bought a whole bunch of upside calls. And
imagine that.
When the stock was $10 yesterday, well, the stock goes to $22 today. There it is, 21 in the pre-market, and bang, those calls go deep in the money. Somebody invested about 900,000, Pete, turned it into 5 million overnight.
Yeah, that doesn't sound so bad. Plus, you had a little bit of time premium added to it, and all of a sudden you're looking at something that goes to plus $11 when it was trading for something closer to $2. That seems like a pretty good trade, John. Absolutely amazing. But the more direct thing, I think, is something that everybody was looking for. As you were talking about it, this is a new type of treatment that is being done by Fusion. And obviously AstraZeneca said, you know what? $2.5 billion, that's what we think you're worth at least. And you've got some in the pipeline. It's not a huge pipeline. I don't want to go out there with that. But there are some other different types of drugs within the pipeline that they've got, that most of them are in preclinical or very, very early stage. So they're years away, in other words. But this particular one, dealing with prostate, like you said, if they can get it where you're not killing some of the good cells along the way and be a lot more, they can be a lot more accurate with what they're going after, this could be something very big for all of us. So it's a big deal. Makes a lot of sense. Makes a lot of sense for AstraZeneca. But I wonder if anybody in there, maybe a secretary or somebody, maybe heard something on the phone or whatever. But whatever the case, there was unusual here, and they certainly did pretty well with that.
Yeah, and when there are no coincidences on Wall Street, folks, Pete and I say it all the time, but when you have a stock that goes from $10 to $21, in other words, it doubles overnight, there's certainly that temptation for somebody that does have a little insider knowledge, and that wouldn't be us or our subscribers. They're just following that 4,300 print. So we can always point to that and say, nobody whispered to us. We followed that trade yesterday, and then today it bore fruit. All right, Pete, let's talk just a little bit about what's going on with JW Nordstrom. This is one that you have called for time and time again, because the Nordstrom family doesn't think that it should be a publicly traded stock. They think they should take it private. And look at that graph. You can see that, it's had a lot of dips. And if you pulled that graph back even further, folks, you'd see even bigger drops. So now it's experiencing a big pop today on the news that maybe they want to take it private, Pete.
Yeah, you know what? And they've tried this before. This is not brand new. A couple of years ago, the Nordstrom family said, you know what? Let's just bring this thing private. And then it just didn't work. It never came to fruition. They're still there. You still got the CEO. I mean, the top couple of guys in the C-suite there are Nordstrom family members, but they continue to want to get this thing back. And obviously they think that they have a game plan that maybe some of the rest are not really with them on that. So they would like to make that bid. It's interesting to see, John, there is some shorts in here. This is a company, though, that, recently they had some pretty solid earnings that they put up. So I think that they're doing the right thing. I think they want to see this stock or this company rather have a lot of success. They're probably not very happy with certain elements. They want to have control over the entire thing. Makes a lot of sense. I think this time there's a better chance for them to possibly get this thing done. This deal could get done. But we've seen this with a lot in this particular category where people are starting to want to get involved in these types of companies, whether it's Macy's or Nordstrom or some of the different names. We are starting to see more and more that are out there that are buyers. In this case, they're insiders that want to buy this out, and they can.
Yeah.
So it'll be interesting.
Oh, yeah. Yep. Yeah. And, allegedly, again, Morgan Stanley did not comment when Reuters asked him. But Morgan Stanley and another firm are two of the firms that are allegedly, according to Reuters report, looking into helping the family take this thing private. And I would say, Pete, with Macy's closing hundreds of stores across the country, this could be a pretty good time for them, just like you said. All right. Now let's dive into what's going on with this Anthony Edwards guy, Pete. And I don't mean the actor. I mean the basketball player for the Timberwolves. Yeah. If you haven't seen him play, folks, Pete is a big fan and talks about it all the time on his Sunday talk radio show called The Sports Huddle. But let's take a little look at Anthony Edwards and see if he doesn't look like another GOAT.
Look at the height. He has to duck underneath it, John. And again, that was just the other night, by the way.
Look at it. His head is above the rim.
It's too bad he's not in good shape. It's really too bad. Yeah. It's really a shame. I mean, the guy, here's what makes
let himself go.
Here's what makes him so special, John. By the way, you know how old he is? He's been in the league for a couple of years. You know how old this guy is? He was born in 2000. He's 22 years old. So to see what he's been able to do in his short lifetime already is amazing. And I've made comparisons without going too far, but in a lot of ways, when you look at his size, his build, his abilities, and his personality, which is a guy who is completely against, and if you saw the All-Star game this year, you know what I'm talking about, completely against all these guys that are doing load management. And Adam Silver doesn't seem to care. He's like, whatever, let these guys do this. No, Anthony Edwards is out front. He's basically my MJ. He's basically Kobe. He gets out there and says, you know what? You know who pays to see me? The fans. So I am going to play in the games. Unless he's hurt, this guy plays, John, and he's absolutely magical. I think he's probably the most electric player in the NBA. We didn't even show you the dunks. He had a dunk last night that was freakish. I mean, if you want to think back and take a look at some of the Michael Jordans where he just continues to float in the air, this guy's got whatever that is. I think it's something very, very special that Michael had, but he plays both ends of the court too. So the guy doesn't do load management. He appreciates the fans. He rebounds. He blocks. He does the steals. He's averaging 26 points a game. I would say this is a guy that anybody and everybody, I don't care if you're a Bulls fan or a Detroit fan or a Denver fan, whatever, you should be a fan of this guy because he is absolutely special. And I've told the people in Minnesota for the last couple of years of our show, John, I go, look, you don't get to see a guy like this very often in your lifetime, and he's playing for the Minnesota Timberwolves. So you Minnesota people ought to get out there. And by the way, you can't get a ticket to a Timberwolves game, John. You just can't. They are selling out night after night after night, 17,000 at the Target Center down there in Minneapolis. It's absolutely amazing. And they're doing the right thing because this guy's playing in Minnesota. I mean, Kevin Garnett's the only other guy I could think of anywhere close to him, but I think Anthony Edwards is even better with what he's able to do. He can bring this team further probably than we ever saw before. So special guy, and I thought it was worthwhile, especially with what he's done lately.
Oh, yeah.
What do you think of this guy? Have you had a chance to ever see him? I've seen him in person. He's a freak.
He's a human highlight film, Pete.
Yeah.
He really is. And, the NBA is loaded with talent, and there are guys who are MVPs like the center on Denver and so forth. And there's some great ones in Houston and Dallas and all the rest. But this kid is special. And you only have to see a couple of those highlights to say, oh, my God, that does look like MJ in an even more muscular body, because that guy looks like he spends a lot of time in the gym, Pete. That guy is jacked.
And, John, when you look at them, I mean, a lot of people aren't paying attention to the NBA just yet because you got March Madness. A lot of people are obviously involved in the whole football, the NFL, what's going on there and everything else. Spring practices are coming on and everything. But I'll tell you, this guy, don't sleep on him. He's fun to watch. He's great. And what the Timberwolves are doing is amazing because Big Cat is out. And yet they're still winning these games.
Yeah.
And Karl Anthony Towns is, he's no slump. I mean, the guy's 7 foot tall. He can shoot threes. He can play inside. He's not a great defender, but everything else in his game is pretty good. So interesting. All right, John, quarterback shopping. So what I wanted to ask you was, because we talked about the Bears, we've talked about them a lot, about what they've done, and obviously their quarterback is no longer. So we kind of have a pretty good idea of who they want and who they want sitting there alone with the Bears. So my question to you is this. The Vikings have made an interesting move because Kirk Cousins is gone. So they got nobody. And when I say nobody, okay, you've got one quarterback who is about as average as it gets, probably below average, because if you only throw a few more touchdowns than interceptions because it's damn near 50-50, I don't know if Sam Darnold is the savior of the Minnesota Vikings. And if you're JJ, the receiver, do you want him being the guy throwing you the ball? So, you just wonder where they're going. Well, where they're going is they made a trade the other day, and they've now got 2 first-round picks, 2. So I guess the question is, they got number 11 right now, John. They also have number 23. So can you pull that together and maybe get up into the top 5 and get somebody else, or do you even need to do that? So what do you think? If you're the GM, do you kind of roll the dice a little bit and figure I got 2, maybe I can get up a little higher, but are you going to get JJ McCarthy? Is that what they're going for? I don't know. They might be, but is he a system quarterback or is he a great quarterback? I don't have that answer, but the GM better have that answer, John, because when you look around and you see a guy who had a great running game, great offensive line, great wide receivers, it kind of makes you wonder because you just don't know. I like JJ McCarthy, but do you got to go all the way up to maybe pick 5 or 6 to get him from 11?
I was going to say, yeah, you got to be in the top 5.
Yeah.
I think he goes in the top 5, Pete.
Yeah.
Your friend Alt will also be in there. And that's that offensive tackle from Notre Dame, folks, that is just a beast. His dad's in the Hall of Fame. He's in the Kansas City Ring of Honor and all that stuff. But this kid's special. He's not going to slip very far in the draft either. So you've got those, you've got May, you've got Caleb, you've got Daniels, Pete, and you've got JJ McCarthy. And I think Alt is in that mix somewhere, obviously not a quarterback, but some team is going to say, look, this is a generational player at tackle. And I think there are plenty of teams that need that right now. So I think he's probably top 5, top 7 pick, Pete. And so if the Vikings were able to pool those 2 picks and move up, they'd still get somebody, but it would be more like McCarthy unless you get into the top 3, because it's pretty clear now that the Bears are going to be going after Caleb.
Yeah.
And then May is going to be going to whoever else is up there looking for a quarterback, probably Washington, after they moved their guy, because they just moved him. It's amazing how little they get for these guys, Pete.
Yeah.
The trades of players that haven't really performed at the level that they were picked at, what that would imply is that, okay, let somebody else make him their project rather than us.
I did a little looking, John, and this will sound kind of crazy to you that you've made the kind of trade that they did, but all they gave up, John, was 2 second-rounders and another late-round pick. I mean, it's amazing to be able to get into the first round at the 23rd pick. So I was thinking this: if you want to roll the dice, you either get JJ at 11, or you miss out on JJ, but down at 23 because nobody else is going to go there. But I would Bo Nix. Why not? You could get a generational type receiver at 11. You could still get Bo Nix at 23 because, a lot of people are skeptical. I went back and looked, John. The guy threw 3 interceptions all year, so that's incredible. His release is less than 2 seconds. He releases the football. And for whatever reason, people have kind of soured on him. They say this and that and whatever. All I can tell you is in games, his worst games, he threw one interception. He threw one interception in 2 games against the University of Washington, who was, one of the best teams in the entire country. And why was that? Because they beat Oregon twice, and he couldn't get past them. So I get it, but I'm not so sure you put all that on Bo Nix. And the way that guy throws the football and with his size and what he's able to do, that guy could be a special quarterback in the NFL, John. And I think these guys are all kind of looking past him, and they're looking past Penix, and they're just saying these guys are later on type guys. Now, Penix had injuries. Bo Nix looked pretty damn good the last couple of years in Oregon after leaving Auburn.
Yeah. There's a lot of intrigue in what Pete just mentions there, folks, because Bo Nix is a special player, was special in college and is still special now. Didn't have an outstanding camp, Pete, in the combine, but he certainly did everything everybody thought he'd do. He didn't fall short of anything. So does he put as much air under the ball as Daniels and some of these other guys? Probably not, but he doesn't need to. He's just very, very accurate. And like you say, the quick release, that's something that whoever gets him is going to be pretty happy about that, I think.
Yeah, and his size and his athleticism. I mean, I think there's a lot of things you could say about this kid, and I'm shocked, to be honest with you, that he is where he is. I think he's better than May, and I think of the other two, Caleb or Jalen, I think Jalen at LSU is a better quarterback than Caleb. So we'll see when it's all said and done, obviously in a year or two. But come back here and we'll go back to this particular show, and you and I both agree. I think Jalen's probably the best quarterback in the draft.
I believe he is.
Yeah.
Well, folks, if you want to get some trades like that one we put up in Fusion Pharmaceutical, where our computers picked up that unusual activity and you were able to follow it for a 500% return, well, come on over, check it out at marketrebellion.com/get started. It's right there on the bottom of your screen, folks, right down there, marketrebellion.com/get started. And Pete and I will be back tomorrow at 1 p.m. Eastern time. Make sure you tune in. Bang.